Maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the challenges of trying to grow grapes and just survive in this type of a landscape.
Yes, every year is more difficult, and usually I think I can speak in general for all winemakers, we don't have the solution for this problem because every year is different, every year is more extremely, or in dry or in wet or too much rain or too much sun, and every year is more harder.
Welcome to this special Clubhouse session of the Italian Wine Podcast. Listen in as members of the Italian wine community engage in fascinating conversations about contemporary wine topics. If you enjoyed the show, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. And remember to subscribe and rate the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your pods.
Hi everyone, this is Beatrice welcoming you to the Italian Wine Clubhouse Ambassadors Corner, one of the top-ranked shows on Italian Wine Podcast. Here, our ambassadors get the mic to interview their favorite producer with total freedom. And if you miss it live, no worries. It's all recorded and dropped later on Italian Wine Podcast. Today's guest host is Stephanie Johnson. Stephanie is a wine writer and wine educator based in New York City. She holds the WSET Diploma in Wine and Spirits and is certified as an Italian wine expert by Vinitaly Academy. Her wine career spans the journalism, retail and restaurant sectors, including 5 years as wine director at City Winery in Soho. She joined Wine and Spirits magazine as tasting director in 2013 and later served as Italian wine editor from 2016 to 24. A passionate educator, she teaches WSET Level 2, Level 3 and Diploma courses at New York City International Wine Center. Her upcoming venture, SteepleJack, will spotlight the heroic stories of Italian wine producers, blending deep expertise with compelling storytelling. Today, she's gonna interview Matej Skerlj. So, Stephanie, Matej, how you doing, guys?
Doing great.
Yes.
Stephanie, Are you ready for our 3 ritual questions?
I am.
Perfect. How did you discover the wines of Skerlj Winery?
Well, I first encountered them just during blind tastings at Wine and Spirits magazine, where I was the Italian wine editor back in 2016. So I tasted the wines and I noticed them because, first of all, that's what's always important, is to have the good wines. And so I became interested in the Carso area after tasting some of these wines and did a trip in 2018 to research an article about the Carso, and that's when I met Matej and some of his family.
So tell us, why did you select Matej as your featured guest?
Well, again, it starts with the wines. I thought he was making really good wines, both red and white. But then, when I visited the Carso, it was just so different from any other Italian region I had ever seen, both from the wines to the terrain to the culture. And it was just so interesting to me to experience that diversity, which is what I really love about Italy, right? Like you go to one corner and it's this way, and you go to another corner, it's completely different. But this was so very specific to this place. So I really found that fascinating. And also Matej's family, who's been there for quite some time. And just their whole story, I thought was really compelling.
That's wonderful. What are the learning objectives that we should expect from this interview?
Well, I think that the Carso is not a very well-known wine region, even among people who know a lot about Italian wine. And so I wanted to shine a bit of a light on the Carso and help people understand a little bit about what the grape varieties are, what the conditions are of trying to grow grapes and make wine in this place, and then just a little bit about the cultural traditions of the Carso and how the area is so unique and different from most of the rest of Italy.
That's wonderful, and it sounds like a really nice plan. So it's time for me to mute myself. Now I'm turning over the floor to you, Stephanie. Have a nice interview, guys.
Thank you. Okay, Matej, hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Why don't we start with your family? And maybe you can just tell us how your family came to be in the place that you live now, how long you've been there, and when did the winemaking start in your family?
My grandfather started working in wine, but in old time, we don't work only with winemaking, but also with small production of vegetable, of milk from cow, and little bit of more agriculture production. And all this little production sell later in Trieste, in the city. And usually here in Holstein, working with small production and direct selling in the city of Trieste, and sure with Osmica, because Osmica in Carso is very famous, because in old time under Austro-Hungaric Empire, the private people can open the door of house and can sell the products, wine, prosciutto, pancetta, and cheese, and eggs, and direct selling without tax. The name of Osmica is from the number of 8 in Slovenian is awesome, and from this name of awesome start the name of Osmica, because in old time Osmica was open for 8 days per year, and now Osmica also in this time now where you can go to Osmica in Carso, but is open for more days, depends of number of pigs and quantity of wine one farm is in production, and is regulated from Comune.
So I just wanted to press on that point a little bit, because it's such an interesting tradition, I think, this Osmica. And I actually went to one when I was there. I'm not clear, so they used to do, it started under the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it was a way to let people sell some of their produce without tax. So in other words, you were not allowed to sell at other times, or not directly to your neighbors. What was that rule about? Why was it only 8 days?
I don't know why 8 days, probably because it was very small production and probably only for a short time. But in the time after World War, after now, then later came here Italy, but also under Italy, the rules is under the Comune rules. Every Comune has different rules for Osmica. For example, here in Zgonico, in our Comune, depends of number of pigs and quantity of wine, and the Comune give me the time or number of day who I can open the Osmica.
And so if someone wanted to come and visit the area during the time and go and visit some of these Osmica, is there a certain time of year when they typically happen, or is it all times of the year?
Okay, usually every time in the year is open, because Osmica is not only in one town, but is in all Carso, Osmica, and usually or in one town or another town, always is 1 or 2 or 10 Osmica open. But probably the period who is more rich of open Osmica is in April for Pasqua.
Easter. And so right now, I mean, if people have access to a map, it's really important, I think, to understand where the Carso is and how sort of wedged it is. It's just this one tiny little strip of land that runs along the coast from Trieste at the very end, along the coast toward Venice, but it's small, and it almost looks like it's wouldn't be part of Italy. It just sort of hangs off the edge of the boot at the top. And I think that it's changed hands, as we've talked about. When I visited you, it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was a big site of many battles during, both world wars, I think. And now you are very close to the border of Slovenia, the border which was drawn at some point after, I think, World War I or World War II, I don't know. But how much of the Slovenian culture is part of your life? You mentioned earlier, I think, that your family actually speaks Slovene at home.
Yeah, we speak Slovene at home, and it's normal here in Carso. In old time, in Trieste, was more Slovenian people than in Ljubljana, the first city in Slovenia. The story of Trieste is very particular from First World War and Second World War. Difficult time, probably the start of fascism and very strong period. But finally, this borderline is very bad, very stupid, especially for Trieste. I think Trieste is the first European city, very open city. Historical is a city of port, of insurance. For example, Generali, Lloyd, different church, different religion, very quiet and very open city, open mind city. And I think it's very stupid to give Trieste under one nation. Or Trieste, I think, is European city, very, very, very European city. And, we are 10 minutes under Trieste on the borderline with Slovenia. And it's very, very beautiful because we have the sea, under we have the mountain. In 2 hours, we are the mountain. For example, snowing, or in 10 minutes, we are on the sea. It's very beautiful. For vineyards, it's very difficult because we don't have the big quantities of soil. We have small quantities of soil, but we have very fresh influence of Bora wind, of the sea, of the limestone. Is the very open, always wind, and our wine is very balanced and very freshness and with high minerality and acidity.
When you talk about the soil, again, that was another thing I had never seen anywhere else. People who are, really interested in wine and getting into the details of viticulture always talk about terroir. And in some ways, it seems to me that you are really creating your own terroir there, because you have this kind of very rocky limestone, hard limestone substrata, and very little soil. And the soil collects in these little sinkholes. I think they call them dolinas. And then you have to take the soil and put it onto the vineyard. Can you just describe how difficult it is to create a vineyard in your area?
Yeah, first time when we prepare the soil for vineyards, we must take off the soil if you have over, you take off, because usually we have 20 centimeters of soil we must take off. We must break the stone under the soil. But usually when you make this operation, usually the biggest part going up and the smallest part going down. And we must rolling this, return the little part in up and the biggest part in down. And we prepare one place of broken stone, one place, and then we cover with 30 centimeters of soil, the distance for planting the vines.
Breaking the stone, basically this limestone below the soil, you have to do this so that the roots can go through?
Yes, we broke for 1 meter in deep, more or less, and this is very good for roots going down and going in deep, and we have more minerality from of this, and especially in summer, we don't use irrigation, but with this operation, the vines don't have problem with water, with dry vintage, because usually the stone has more humidity than only the soil.
So it's also very expensive then. You must need a lot of heavy equipment, and you have to bring soil in sometimes from other places. So this is a big investment, I would imagine, for a small winery.
Yes, probably is the most difficult investment, prepare the vineyards. But, also usually our cellar is in the deep under the soil, usually in cave. And also is difficult because we have small vineyards. Usually we don't have vineyards all in one part. For example, we have 2-3 hectares in 10, 11, 12 different little vineyards. All around our town, Sales, we have 12 different little vineyards of 1,000 meters, 2,000 meters. And in this case, we must plant with high density. And this is all. Another big problem is because we plant with high density. Usually we have 1.50 meters for 60 centimeters vines to vines on Albarello or on Guyot. But, when you plant with high density, you must be always in vineyards and must be all perfect work, and it's more difficult and more hour of working for the good work in this condition.
People who travel to a lot of wine regions were accustomed to seeing vineyards that are on steep slopes, and we kind of just assume that means that that's a quality vineyard when you have a steep slope. And I asked you, I said, why are there no vineyards on slopes? And you just said, we would have no soil left because erosion would just wash it all away. So I felt a little silly then. But I wanted to read a quote from an American journalist who was traveling in the Carso during World War I, and he described it this way. He said, imagine a vast limestone plateau varying in height from 700 to 2,500 feet, which is as treeless and waterless as the deserts of Chihuahua, as desolate and forbidding as the Dakota Badlands, with a surface as torn and twisted and jagged as the lava beds of Utah, and with a summer climate like that of Death Valley in July. Maybe that sounds a little harsh to you, but I wanted to ask you, I do know that you have a lot of issues with wind and weather challenges. So maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the challenges of trying to grow grapes and just survive in this type of a landscape.
Yes, every year is more difficult, and usually I think I can speak for in general for all winemaker, we don't have the solution for this problem because every year is different, every year is more extremely, or in dry or in wet or too much rain or too much sun, and every year is more harder. In my vineyards, for example, some time ago we clean more leaves and clean all around the grape, clean much more hard. Now in in part of south, we clean a little bit less. Probably we must be always ready to, after extremely situation, work or to make some changes in vineyard. But, we don't have solution. We don't have for example, 2 years ago, we had one grandinata, and there's no solution for these problems,
Do you mean hail? Ice coming with the rain? Yeah. And there's also this wind, they call it the Bora wind, that comes down from the mountains, and it's cold and very strong. What do you have to do to manage that? Is that more how you plant your vineyards and where you plant your vineyards, or are there other things you can do to protect the vines from the wind, the strong winds?
Bora wind is very strong, but we used wood for barley in vineyards, and it's very important to prepare the vineyards with barley more in deep, and the vineyards and the vines usually is prepared with fili, I don't know in English, and we prepare all before. But for us, the Bora is important, and in general, the wind is very important, because in vineyards, also after the rain, we have always vineyards, dry vineyards, and we can make less quantities of treatments, because we, in our farm, we make treatments only with copper and sulfur. We don't use systemic, and we work in biologic agriculture. And for us, the Bora wind and the wind in general is very important and is very positive here.
For those of our listeners, we have a lot of listeners who are Italian wine ambassadors who have studied about a lot of the grape varieties of Italy, the native grape varieties. And so I think they would be interested to hear from you about the three main varieties that you work with. But I mean, one is Malvasia, which we know there's many different types. So many, maybe you can talk a little bit about what specific type of Malvasia you are working with there. And then also Vitovska, the other white variety, and Tarano, the red.
Yes, Malvasia is Malvasia istriana, typical here, and Malvasia istriana is planted also in Istria and a little bit in Collio also, and is not right to say more easy, but is very rich wine, is very aromatic wine, and beautiful grape, a little bit more alcohol degrees, and is more easy for easy approach for start. I think this. Vitovska and Tarano is indigenous grape. Vitovska and Tarano is only on the Carso soil, and I think is more for professional wine lover or the people who has more experience in wine, because for me is very, very tiny, very, very finest, very delicato, very, very long, but because usually has only 12 degrees and has high salty and minerality, and is perfect, especially for tiny food, for delicato. I think, I don't know for another grape with this approach of wine. It's very, very delicious. And Tarano is very, very different. It's a normal Italian red wine with high acidity. It's a Refosco family, but if we plant this Refosco on the red soil and limestone in Carso, we produced high acidity red wine, and it's totally different, because here in Italy, especially in Italy, probably when we see one glass of red wine, immediately we have in mind one Tuscany or Piemonte wine. No, Tarano is in opposite. Is like white wine with high acidity, very minerality, and is more French wine, I think. Yes.
Yeah, it's very, palate cleansing, I would say. Both Vitovska and Tarano, both have such high acidity that it just refreshes your palate and makes you want to keep drinking and eating something salty.
Yeah, the reach of Carso is this salty of all wine. Also for Malvasia, because usually Malvasia is more rich, but with this salty and minerality in Carso, I think the Malvasia have better balance in the glass. Malvasia is beautiful in the Carso. For example, okay, it's not typical in Carso, but if you plant, for example, Merlot in Carso is same. It has beautiful balance because it's more rich grape, but with our minerality and acidity produced the beautiful balance in the glass.
Now, so you work with these 3 varieties, and can you tell me a little bit about when your family first started to produce wine? I know you were more of an all-purpose farm at first, but when did you first start working with vineyards, and then when did you transition to becoming more of a primary wine producer where you are bottling and selling your wine to export markets?
The winemaking started also my grandfather before, more for open wine to sell in Osmica or direct. Then continues my father with agriturismo in more or less in 90, also with open wine and also with Vitosca, Malvasia and Tarano. And then later, we start with bottling with vintage 2004, 20 years ago. But I start with aging in wood, with skin contact maceration, with 2 years aging and then bottling. And yes, more with wine with a little bit more structure, more deep wine. But this changing start in vineyards because we harvest only 4 grape per vines with small production, because it's very important in Carso to have small quantities of grape on vines, because it's normal because we have high acidity but low degrees, and we can have high degrees only if you work with small quantities of grape. The changing start in vineyards and then continue in cellar with skin contact, aging, with fermentation without yeasts, without selection yeast. And we start in a natural style. And yes, for me it was better wine than before.
So when you first started making the wine, my understanding, your grandfather or whoever, we were just making the fresh wines, the wines in the fresh style. Is that right? No skin contact.
Here in Carso, we work always with skin contact for low quantities of days, for 3-4 days, and take off the wine after 4 days of skin contact. Then later I start with 2 weeks in contact with skins. Now we work with 2 weeks or 3 weeks in contact with skins. Before, my grandfather and my father usually 4 days, 5 days, 1 week maximum, and take off.
So would you describe your wines as orange wines, your white wines?
But I think orange wine in general, the Carso not have orange wine. Is not ideal pronounced orange wine. I think the orange wine is after 10, 11 years of aging or with more oldest wine. In Carso, we have freshness, and usually we sell after 2 years of aging, and it's still very fresh. And I think it's more normal white wine. I think one biggest structure white wine, not still orange. Orange, I think if I open my bottle after 10 years, okay, it has more orange, more hard color, but is when we sell after 2 years is normal white wine, I think.
Okay, so, when we think of orange wines, we think of those wines that have been, left on the skins in amphora for very long periods of time and the slow oxidation. And this is not what you are doing, right? I mean, you are using the skins to build structure and texture, but there's none of the color and none of the oxidation that happens with orange wines. Is that correct?
Yes, the oxidation is lowest later in bottle and is normal. And for one natural wine is very normal and beautiful, a little bit of oxidation in time. But I think we sell still young wine after 2 years, and is in color is normal white, is very normal white. We used skin contact for structure, for balance with minerality, for have more glycerin, more structure in the glass, for more rich wine in the glass. But I think is not still orange. Orange, I think, is probably more oldest, in general, little bit more oldest wine, or for meditation wine.
Right. How many bottles do you produce per year, approximately? I'm sure it varies, but on average.
Now, we are very small, and now in total we have 15,000 bottles, more or less, per year.
Okay.
Terrano usually a little bit less quantities, 2,000 bottles. Then we have Malvasia and Vitosca, 5,000 bottles of each, 6,000 bottles of each. And then 1 little reserve of Vitosca in stone. In this case, we fermentation for more time in contact with skins, 1 year in contact with skins, in stone barrel, in Carso stone, Arizina stone. We have 3 of these, one of 1,400 liters, 1,200 liters, the second, and 900 liters. Like amphora methods, but we used our stone, our Arizina stone, and we produced 1 liter reserva of this, of Vitosca, with 1 year in contact with skins, yes.
And do you export all of these wines, including the reserva?
Yes, we export. Now the market little bit change, but our first market is in Japan of this type of wine, and then a little bit of all around the world, a little bit in north of Europe, in French, in Canada, in Australia, a little bit in China, a little bit in United States. And yes, sure is Nikkei market, very, very small market, but very, very interesting.
Why do you think your wines and the wines of the Carso have been received so well in Japan?
In general, Japan has for natural wine especially, has one good relation also with food and with restaurants, because the Japan restaurants has more real philosophy. I think it's very important, the materia prima, the good food and good vegetable and good every food, very simple and very good. For Japan, it's very important to be natural and very simple and very deep and real. This is very, very important for Japan market. Yeah.
Do you have any stories that your family carries on from, earlier times that would tell us anything about your culture or your history? Are there any family stories that you would be willing to share with us?
Yes. My grandfather, unfortunately, I don't know my grandfather because did before I born. And because my grandfather did when my father was 9 years old, and my father work in farm with different, not only with wine, but with vegetable, with cow, with pigs, with ham, and all these product in little production sell in Osmica, in agriturismo, or in the city. And for me was probably the best years of my life, because it's, for me, in my mind, is ideal farm of little bit of each and product, very real food and very good food, and immediately in the farm. But in the time here in Italy, it's very difficult to work, especially for bureaucracy. And in the time, you must choose for one of these. It's very difficult to work 10 different parts of farm. And with father, we have good relation, and my father helped me to start with vineyards, with wine. Later, I have good experience, for example, with Zidarich or with Radicon, who introduced me in the skin contact maceration and aging and natural wine. And I remember was very, very good group, especially in Vinitaly, with all these famous winemaker. And probably I was the most younger, because was 20 years ago. But for example, Radicon invite me always on your house to testing wine and to be also on the party, and was very, very nice people and nice group of these winemakers here in Friuli in general.
Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you think people should know about the Carso?
I think the Carso has high potential because it's still indigenous or wild terroir, because we don't have all around vines, but we have all around woods, and the vines is in small part. Vineyards is the little vineyards all around the wood. And we have still contact with nature and with people, with our story, with our tradition. And also with wine, we make wine with traditional methods. And this, for me, is the very, very important for us. Also, our rich minerality, salty, balance in the glass. And probably I think is the wine who we can give with all food, with more rich food or more poor food. But I think the one glass of Vitosca or Malvasia is good for all food. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that, for people who are really interested in Italian wine, if you haven't been to the Carso, and if you like to travel off the beaten path a little bit, because it's not the easiest place to get to, it is worthwhile going to see the city of Trieste, which is so also different from most other Italian cities, and then going to see these small, really, it's mostly small family farmers who are making the wine there, and it's a very authentic experience. So I would highly recommend that people make an effort to go and explore the Carso and the wines of that area. So thank you, Matej, so much for taking time with us today and helping us understand more about your region and your wines.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Matej. That was wonderful. How you feeling, guys?
I'm good, but I didn't have to speak a different language for the whole
Yeah,
time.
isn't it? Matej, you were great, really.
My English is very bad. But...
No, it's not. That was amazing. No, really, guys, that was such a nice interview. Thank you so much for spending time with us. To wrap things up, for those who are interested to participate, just send us a DM through our Instagram or mail our Italian Wine Podcast producer at info@italianwinepodcast.com. Thank you, everyone, for listening in, and thank you again, Stephanie and Matej. That was really wonderful. Bye-bye from everyone. Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, cin cin.